So welcome back to the podcast that isn't actually a podcast, but more so feels like one, that definitely has transformed itself into like some pseudo ASMR that isn't technically ASMR, but you'll either be bored enough or find my voice soothing enough to actually fall asleep. Whatever comes first is entirely up to you. I hope everyone's doing well, having a good week. I think it's actually been 2 weeks since I've done the first video for this. Quick little opening statement. I want to thank you for the incredible support on the first episode of the podcast that isn't a podcast. I was genuinely unsure on how it would be received and whether or not it would kind of just be like a waste of time. For someone that values their time very heavily, and considering the length of that audio, I think that was like a 34-minute video in total, but the raw length of that audio that I had to go through was an hour and a half. So I definitely cut out a lot, and it took honestly a lot longer than I expected to actually get through it. It's definitely more so a fault on my end, just because I'm very particular on what goes into audio and like how much of a break there is between like each sentence and breathing and all that. So sometimes audio can be very tedious, to put simply, but I was genuinely surprised a lot of you enjoyed it, and I'm more than thankful for all of the kind words. Yes, I did call myself boring because I do consider myself a boring person. That was not a plea for sympathy or, to compliment me. Don't feel like I was trying to, make you feel bad for me or something like that. It's definitely not that big of an issue, but I am very thankful for all of the kind words. They're very much appreciated. I think the biggest thing that I said, I kind of more so reiterated that the amount of, functionality that these podcasts would have in terms of answering questions or just talking about specific things would rely more so on you. I could definitely talk about a lot of things that I want to, but I would rather talk about things that you mention or that you would like for me to talk about. Does that make sense? We'll see how this one goes. Maybe there's a little bit more recommendation. Maybe there's positive comments. Maybe there's hate comments this time. Just a curveball just to throw in there. All in all, I am extremely thankful for the support on the video, and I will kind of continue doing them maybe every 2 weeks, maybe once a week, and they're probably not going to be inherently long. I think 30 minutes is pretty comfortable, or even 20 to 30 minutes, but when you start getting into the 30 to 40 to an hour long, it kind of gets a little bit difficult on myself to kind of justify no editing, and that's a very weird mindset that I feel a lot of people may not understand, is that when I do these types of videos, the fact that there's no editing in them really does not sit well with me. It's kind of like this weird ticking thing in the back of my mind that, I'm being lazy, I should edit it. But I literally do not have the time to edit a 20 to 30 minute videos to the levels that I would be happy with, especially around so many different topics and interweaving conversations that spiral off into mad tangents. Like, there's not a whole lot of consistency or coherency to this kind of format of video. So it makes it even more difficult to edit, which now just sounds like I'm giving a bunch of excuses, but bottom line is I don't have the time to edit a 20 to 30 minute video once a week that doesn't clash with the other videos that I'm working on. So as much as it does make me feel like utter dung or just the worst human to ever exist, like I'm beyond lazy or something, and this is just my personal kind of understanding of the situation, I somewhat have to push it to the side and be like, okay, hopefully this is enjoyable enough. It got to the point where I even forgot to kind of put any sort of editing on it in terms of like showing the series that I was talking about, or even the title name, which is a pretty obvious thing, right? You would think if you're talking about a manga, even if it has some sort of weird title, that you should probably put an image of it up. Maybe even the title of the series in case people are interested. That's normal. That should be a thing. I did not do that. And it's kind of just completely escaped my mind because I kind of pushed everything away from it's okay for me to kind of upload one of these videos once a week or every twice a week. So I was trying to get into that mindset and probably just completely bypassed it. Bit of a ramble. I apologize, but hopefully that kind of clears that up. Do remember that this is more so a work in progress, so I'm probably going to change a lot of things around, or some things. I want to start this off by saying that I hope you've had a good week, whether it be from work or school. Maybe you got the week off, maybe you're not doing anything, maybe you've just been vibing. Hope you've enjoyed yourself, you're eating well, you're drinking plenty of water, and just having a good time. Personally, for myself, I've been having kind of a horrible week. It's not the worst, obviously, but it's definitely been bothersome, tiring, repetitive. It's been one of those weeks where every time you kind of just wake up and you just feel like doing absolutely nothing. And I'm not really a person that sleeps all too much, which in itself is is very unhealthy, very detrimental. I would not recommend it. Like, I'm a person that enjoys working. I'm a person that is always surrounded by working. So when I don't do that, I feel really bad. Like, I feel like I'm the worst thing to ever exist. And it's hard for me to relax if I don't either prepare my mental state to be in this day of relaxation, or I get fully flustered and all over the place if it kind of comes out of nowhere. If I try and have like a half day type thing. Basically, I have to prep in advance that tomorrow I'm going to take a day off, or I'm going to do half a day or something. I can't just finish a video and be like, okay, well, that's it. Time to go play games or relax, or, you know, whatever it may be. But this week has just been tiresome, just more so than usual. It's like when you wake up and you don't want to get up. It's like, oh, I just want to lay in bed for, you know, another 20 minutes, which may turn into an hour, which may turn into 3 hours, which then you realize that you're very much underslept and extremely exhausted, but you still get up anyway. I think in that sense, it's also been pretty rough. I feel like it's starting to come to the end of it though. Like, I've been feeling a little bit better, kind of mentally or emotionally, as well as physically. I feel like a little bit of my energy is coming back. I feel a little bit more positive, and I feel a little bit more cheery. When I get kind of in the lower points of being emotional, I kind of just don't show emotion. Like, I feel like a blank face or a blank canvas, or just like a hollow well of nothing. Like, I'll just walk around with a complete blank expression. It's kind of scary, to be honest. And I won't really care about all these things, but then, you know, in your head, everything's kind of just racing or just being weird. So, and then any sort of conversation that you have with people is very minimalistic or very one-worded, hardly even an interaction. So I've kind of just jotted it down as one of those weeks, or one of those handful of days, or maybe for some people even longer. It feels like it's getting better though, which hopefully kicks me back into gear for making videos. And I do have stuff in the works in terms of videos that definitely feel a little bit more creative, and hopefully stir up more of that creative juice within myself a little bit more. Because as much as I enjoy talking about different series and literature, manga, manhwa, whatever it may be, and certain concepts or aspects within them, there's only really so much you can do. There's always a different perspective. There's always another perspective. Kind of talking about one specific concept from so many different perspectives in like a circle is really repetitive. And creatively, it's very much the same thing. It may be a lot more enjoyable watching it. I'd argue that's kind of the main appeal for like reviews of manga, is that everyone has their own interpretation of it. So people can talk about a chapter or a series pretty much the exact same way, but their interpretation, their perspective is most likely going to be entirely different, what they value and what they enjoy. So hopefully the videos that are very in early production stages is something that people enjoy. I don't want to tease all too much, but it is more so akin to a different version of what if. You know, the very endless concept of what if? That's kind of what I'm going for, except it's not exactly what if. It's kind of a different version of it. So hopefully it makes for some interesting conversations and discussions, not only about the story that I'm doing it with, which I could do it with any story, but more so the literature side of things, how things are utilized or weaponized, or what makes this work, or how to fill in this, etc. So in due time, we shall see. Speaking of what ifs and literature, I think it's a great segue into this comment. I would love to hear what kind of stories you would love to tell, or thinking about stories you've enjoyed and analyzed. You could provide insight into how you would construct your own manga, from the story structure, art, paneling layout, etc. A story that I would love to tell. It's kind of a loaded question, to be honest. If it was kind of more so in the form of manga, and I could kind of depict it in the best way possible, I think a story that is told through artwork, maybe not 100%, but like a 70-30, 60-40, maybe even less, maybe like 80-20. I think stories that kind of rotate around this very symbolic art style and very unique paneling that feels just gorgeous and just very addicting to read would be my go-to like style, if that was possible. I think it's not really much of a surprise that my stories would be very serious, because I enjoy very serious stories. I enjoy stories that usually focused on real-world issues, more so to do with mental health, but I do kind of love the alternative kind of psychological horror that comes with it. So it's a little bit difficult to do, because obviously you want to kind of pay respect and show off kind of these mental health issues in a respectful respectful way. You don't want to glorify them. You don't want to make them seem like a good thing or weaponize it as like a power or something, but instead capture it in its purest form, pay respect and homage to it, and show that you understand how serious this is, and then inlay your psychological horror. I think even then, just based off the stories that I've talked about that I really enjoy, anything by Ino Asano or Oyasumi Punpun is honestly the best example of stories that I would love to tell. Blood on the Tracks, or A Trail of Blood by Oshimi Shuzo, is quite literally par for par what I would want to tell as a story, artwork and all. His artwork kind of tells a completely different story to the one that he's actually writing. It's a lot more scarier, it's a lot more suffocating, it's a lot more kind of indulging, it's completely different and creates this very complex clash of tones and atmospheres. That's definitely psychological horror done perfectly, I would say. A Trail of Blood or Blood on the Tracks is extremely underrated, and I think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, or for the opposite reason of Oyasumi Punpun, for example. So if I were to say that Shuzo takes mental health or these very complex issues that you should be paying respect to in your works and shouldn't obviously be glorifying them, and then puts this psychological horror twist on them, Asano would be the person that shows it in the most real and authentic type of way, and then weaponizes it to tell a heartbreaking story. So you get two completely different experiences, but they're on the same coin. They're just the different faces of them. Probably wrong for me to compare someone like Ino Asano to Oshimi Shuzo and vice versa, because they're different authors. They do things differently, they approach stories differently, but I guess in the grand scheme and in like a perfect world, they kind of view each other as sitting within the same genre of storytelling. It's just how they go about it. One's more psychological horror, the other's more real and authentic, and they're battling in different regards. That was a very circular way to answer your question, but I would tell a story like Oshimi Shuzo. It's something dark and gritty that has a bit of a horror twist to it. I really love horror done in an atmospheric type of way. I don't really care for jump scares or like the typical demons or zombies, etc. Monster flicks. Monster flicks are like a kind of guilty pleasure, but when I say horror, I love atmospheric horror, where like someone's very simple smiling face can be filled with so much kind of anxiety or dread or just suffocating in general. The location that they're around is very brooding and mysterious and kind of sends chills up your spine, like stuff like that. And depicting it with very specific artwork is going to achieve that best result. I think that's why I really enjoy Shuzo's work, is because his art and how he shades specifically, and also how he draws his characters' faces are so expressionable and is so easy to morph and spiral into something else entirely to show this completely scary emotion that you wouldn't notice. Moving on, I love this new format. Thank you. Next time, you could talk about what it's like making videos about manga and what your ambitions are. What's it like making videos about manga? Honestly, it's kind of stressful. Even though there is an endless supply of manga that you can read and that you can talk about, finding what ones feel worthwhile to talk about is kind of the bigger issue. I think any creator could talk about anything that they find interesting, but whether or not the audience would find it interesting is an entirely different thing. Whether or not it's even available in English, whether or not it's brand new or extremely old, and whether or not it's entirely super long or short. I really enjoy manga recommendations with people telling me, oh, you should check out this, you should do this, I think you'd like it, especially because a lot of you get the idea of what I enjoy, even though I pretty much would read anything. The recommendations are always nice, but some of them are long. When I see a series that has like 200 plus chapters, I shriek inside. I am internally yelling. It's even worse or more apparent if I really enjoy the manga. So I think a way to get around it is that I might read as much as I can physically before I have to start making a video and kind of editing and everything in between, before I run out of time basically. A lot of stuff I try and plan in advance, so talking about specific series is very easy to do. Like the Kaizen videos and the Chainsaw Man videos are kind of just more passion videos because I want to talk about specific things from those series. Whereas talking about a whole manga, sometimes I have to plan like 3 weeks ahead just so I can find enough time to read enough material to give, I guess, justifiable or at least enjoyable thoughts on them, and then obviously go through the process of finding everything for it and at least showing some sort of what the media looks like in terms of marketing or volume covers, etc. And sometimes even those are very hard to come by. If the series isn't well known, there may only be like 2 or 3 images for me to actually use, and then I'm kind of in a pickle where I have to kind of redraw character designs or manga panels to avoid copyright, and that's a little bit more difficult but a little bit more crafty and creative. I've done it a handful of times for a couple of different series, but I think in the grand scheme of things, making videos starts with what series to read, because that's time, and that's time you could be working on something else. The actual process of editing and everything in between can be extremely simplistic, extremely straightforward, or overly complex and detrimental. I think it's one of those things that changes quite drastically depending on what mental state or mood you're in. You may be having a really good day, and that will reflect in the way you edit your video. You may be super creative that day. You may use things differently, and also depends on how formulaic you are. A lot of people like to create completely original videos every single time, which I have a lot of respect for, because that's a very difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of time, and unfortunately a lot of those videos that are like that only come out once a week or once every 2 weeks. But the video is obviously entertaining and really enjoyable. The problem I have is that I kind of try to want to create a tone for a video, or like a general atmosphere for all of my videos, without using anime clips as like the main focus, because that's like the most go-to thing that people use is anime clips, and unfortunately for myself, I find it extremely boring. Obviously you could say that for anything. My videos are obviously not for everyone. They're super kind of weirdly structured, and a lot of people don't enjoy them. Sometimes they may make you think a little bit too much, whereas kind of having hand-holdy anime clips would be a lot easier. I just don't enjoy using them. Plus there's the whole copyright thing you have to deal with, and it's something that I kind of want to tend to avoid as best as possible. So I think depending on your mood and where you are for the day, you can either have a really great time with videos and creating them, or have a really horrible time creating them. But it feels worthwhile nonetheless, and I'm very much grateful for the amount of love that some of them get. I think that's really the hardest hitting thing, is that you spend a lot of time on a video that you're really passionate or happy with, and then it underperforms. And the whole idea of YouTube is not to be ruled by numbers, but the way YouTube is structured, it's like the first thing that you see, especially with how they frame it. It's like, oh, this video done worse than every single other video that you've ever done in the past month. Congratulations. That is basically what YouTube does. When you log on, when you kind of go check, it shows you how your video is performing, and it's kind of disheartening for people that struggle with the number thing. I personally struggle with the number thing, not all too often, but sometimes when I'm having a bad week, it'll kind of flare up there. Like, I completely missed with this video, this was a waste of time, I should have done this differently, or should have edited it better, or made it more enjoyable or entertaining. So a long process, but it's fun, it's worthwhile. It can be very rewarding, very creatively liberating, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it with its ups and downs. What are my ambitions? I'll keep it to YouTube, but honestly just continue what I'm doing. Just grow and talk about interesting stories, and hopefully be somewhat remembered for the series that I talk about, for the series that I put enough time and passion and creativity into. That's kind of the only thing, really. Growing on YouTube is obviously really great, and obviously I'm honored and very thankful to be where I am today. I honestly just completely lost my train of thought. I don't know what happened. Like, I knew what I was saying, I just don't know what I was going to say after it. I'm honored to be where I am today, and I'm very much thankful. Yes, I just repeated myself, but something that continues to drive me is not necessarily the numbers of like how many subs I have or how many overall views I have, but more so just my name being connected and remembered for a certain series. I say it like it's a simple thing to achieve, but it comes with time. It comes with pouring so much hard work into one specific series over multiple different series. I was lucky enough to have it with Tokyo Ghoul, as kind of that's where it started. That's where the whole idea of being remembered for a story came from. And then it happened kind of portionally with Attack on Titan. And when I consider the channel sizes around me, when I consider the people talking about Attack on Titan, people mentioning my name alongside them was very humbling. It felt like I reached that point, that my name was remembered for Attack on Titan alongside some of the best people that talk about it. Obviously that's completely subjective, and everyone has their own person that they go to for specific series, but that's basically what I enjoy. Moving on, maybe talk about your content creation process. Love you, Wag. Thank you very much. This is basically just like a rephrasing of the previous question, but to break it down to its fundamentals, find story that looks interesting or sounds interesting. Read said story. Record audio for said video. Edit audio. Find visual representation of said media. Customize it so it is friendly to YouTube algorithm and copyright system. Compile it into dogpile of video. Mash it up, stretch it out, and force it over 10 to 15 minutes. That sounds kind of bad when I put it like that, but a lot of my videos kind of naturally fall around that mark anyway. They're not really stretched out to try and reach this certain landmark or this certain kind of stopping point, if you will. Some series are obnoxiously long for no reason, like I think the Fire Punch and even the Tower of God video, they were 20 plus minutes long, or very close to 20 plus minutes. So once happy with that, render it, create a thumbnail, and upload. That's the very simple fundamental side of it. The more detailed explanation for the ins and outs is definitely more so in the previous question. Also, for a recommendation topic, I would love to hear you talk about rom-coms, and just to hear your deeper thoughts of things like Nisekoi, We Never Learn, Kaguya-sama, Love is War, etc. would be fun to hear. Funny enough, this isn't the opposite of what I usually talk about. Actually, you're not wrong in that regard, it is, but what I enjoy, however, I absolutely love rom-coms. Rom-coms are kind of like something that you can always enjoy or come back to and enjoy, because they're not trying to be anything super crazy. They're not trying to be the next big thing. They're not trying to build around a topic that is completely redundant. And that's kind of a weird way to explain it, but I really enjoyed Nisekoi. I remember reading it pretty much weekly when it released, and that was kind of like the biggest romance story within Weekly Shonen Jump at the time. And it was just nice. It was a good read. It was nice to kind of attach on to everything else and a good change of pace. I think out of the ones you mentioned, my least favorite, but I still enjoy it wholeheartedly. We Never Learn, I think, is really good. It actually took me by surprise because I remember reading it and being like, oh, this is alright, and then kind of just falling in love with the characters and their relationship and like the overall story. Pretty simple and straight to the point, but same kind of mindset, very fun and quirky and just a nice change of pace. Kaguya-sama is a different breed though. Kaguya-sama out of all of those is definitely a rom-com, but its approach to being a rom-com is entirely different. It's not the tried and true rom-com that is successful within Weekly Shonen Jump, and that shouldn't be surprising because it's not within Weekly Shonen Jump. It's in Weekly Young Jump. It's technically an adult manga, or for adults. It's marketed towards adults. Weekly Young Jump is the exact same place Tokyo Ghoul was published in, or Kingdom, the political Chinese warfare manga. So when you have a Kaguya-sama in there, it's pretty funny, but it's also extremely popular. It's extremely successful, and for good reason. The characters are very unique in their own regard, but are so very much relatable. Obviously, there's a lot of over-exaggeration there, but it's very beautifully designed. The relationship between a lot of their characters, once again, relatable, enjoyable, incredibly crafted and conceptualized. Personal favorites of mine would be kind of more tragic-driven ones, which I don't think there's a whole lot in terms of manga. I think Your Lie in April is, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It might have been the only one I've read that is actually a manga, but I really enjoy Clannad. If Clannad was a manga originally before its anime, which I don't think it was, I'm pretty sure that a manga happened after, or maybe it was a light novel prior. I can't remember. But Clannad, Your Lie in April, there's an author that has Kubo in his name, but isn't Tight Kubo that does Bleach. Seo Kubo. It's something along those lines. And he does the manga for Suzuka, Fuka, Kimi no Uramachi, and then he done like this Office one recently. But those are super enjoyable. I really like the more kind of grounded in reality ones that aren't so coy and beat around the bush. More so the ones that feel more authentic. And I think both definitely Fuka and Kimi no Uramachi specifically by him. I think it's Seo Kuji. I think that's his name. Seo Kuji. It's something like that. I just realized I have to kind of put all of this on screen now. Shouldn't be too difficult. But yeah, I definitely enjoy rom-coms. I have fun with them and I get a lot of enjoyment out of them. Some of them just feel super repetitive and the same as anything else I've read. So usually they have to have either a kind of unique-ish concept or unique-ish characters, or maybe even just memorable. I think Blue Box is just solid through and through, and I guess that would be considered a rom-com, but it is channeling that late 90s, early 2000s aesthetic and approach to storytelling, which is something you don't get in Weekly Shonen Jump, so I am excited to see how it grows. Should be very enjoyable. Moving on, who is some of your favorite anime manga protagonists and antagonists? Love your videos. Thank you very much. This is pretty much a loaded question because I could talk about protagonists all day and antagonists. But to name a few, Punpun or Onodera Punpun from Oyasumi Punpun. I really enjoy Kaneki. Shin from Kingdom. The boy from The Horizon. He doesn't actually have a name, he's just called The Boy. It's so hard to think of like character names off the top of my head, but antagonists, I really enjoy Furuta from Tokyo Ghoul. Johan from Monster, of course. Griffith from Berserk, of course. I can also add Guts to the main character side. I'm trying to think of like pinnacle antagonists or those ones that I've enjoyed, and I've just read so much that they all kind of blur together, so I can't really pick them out, which is a little bit sad. But would Askeladd from Vinland Saga count as an antagonist? Because he's really good. I really enjoyed him. Obviously you gotta put Thorfinn in the protagonist side as well. See what I mean? Like I just remember series randomly, but I think off the top of my empty head, that would be some of the very many that I can remember and that I really do enjoy. I apologize deeply if I scuffed that answer, but hopefully that works. Moving on, will I ever watch a comedy anime like Gintama? I tried to watch Gintama once. Twice, actually. I think I got like 50 episodes in like 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. A long time ago, let's put it like that. And I can understand why Gintama is very much loved. It's got this very unique approach to comedy, and then it mixes severity within it. Because of how apparent it is, it's a very unique way of telling a story. But Gintama is universally loved for both its comedy and its severity, and how it enhances both of them. So the comedy is kind of used as a breather away from the severity of the story. The issue that I personally have, not with Gintama, but more so just comedy in general, is that I don't really enjoy them. Comedy kind of tailors around a very specific style of writing, which is super repetitive for myself. And it's one that I feel like I'm running in place. If I'm reading a story that's focused around comedy, I feel like I am going nowhere, and it's difficult for me to enjoy. Now, I'm not saying that every inch of comedy is like that. Obviously, stories having comedy within them that feel progressive and that are well handled or managed is some of the best things that you can experience. Spy X Family is a prime example for me where, even though I don't really care all too much for comedy, like I never really seek it, I absolutely adore it within Spy X Family. Even that style of comedy is hilarious to me. It's simple, but it has a lot of kind of emphasis on its facial expressions and utilizing them to convey emotion. Of course, on top of the overly exaggerated and humorous kind of situations they get themselves within, but Gintama takes it to a whole new level where perception is very much needed. You have to be paying attention, and if you're not, you're gonna either get extremely lost or just not sure of what's going on. I think that's more so a fault on my behalf, where I don't think I would ever really watch Gintama just because it's really long. I'm more so obligated to read it just because I can fly through a lot of it and pay more attention to it, and maybe then my thoughts would change. Maybe the comedy would be a little bit different within a manga format instead of the anime format. But I know Gintama is well loved. It's got a massive community behind it, and it does things extremely well. Like, it's not all 700 plus chapters of, I believe, of comedy. Of course, it's got some very crazy serious moments within it. Who knows, maybe one day I'll put myself through the hurdles of actually getting through all of it. But moving on, what's your favorite thing to do outside of YouTube? Honestly, sleep. I just sleep, rest, play games, eat food, sit in sun, swim occasionally. Swimming's nice. In a pool, not in the ocean. I ain't trying to swim in the ocean, even though it's like a normal thing here, but, or just like a wave sucking me out into the ocean just sounds horrifying. I'd rather not deal with that. But yeah, that answer to that question is not very interesting. I don't really have a whole lot of time doing nothing. I don't really have a lot of freedom time or enjoyment time. Like, my enjoyment time or my winding down time is maybe playing a couple of games or listening to music or just sitting outside and vibing in the sun or something. Like, it's very simple. It's very kind of therapeutic for the mind. Pretty boring, I'd say. So this is actually going to be the last question, but surprisingly, I didn't realize how long I've been talking for. It's almost been an hour. I thought I was going to struggle with this video just because I didn't really have many questions, but hopefully I managed to fill them out rather well and talk about some things that I wanted to talk about. But the final question, what are your thoughts on Attack on Titan 139.5 additional pages? Plus, you're my favorite YouTuber. Thank you for your effort. Thank you for the kind words. I'm going to join another question in here on what are my thoughts on Attack on Titan Requiem. If you haven't already noticed, or if you maybe missed any of the statements that I made regarding Attack on Titan, I did not want to talk about it. I have not wanted to talk about Attack on Titan once since it's finished. And it's not anything to do kind of with the series itself, its integrity, its architecture, its approach to storytelling. Like, I have my grimes with it. I have my issues with it, but I still would enjoy talking about it. Not to mention, for clarity, it does well on the channel. A lot of people enjoy when I talk about it, or there's a lot of discourse, and that's kind of where it stems from. That's kind of my issue with Attack on Titan, or even briefly mentioning it. It kind of feels like a cardinal sin now to talk about it here, because it's kind of away from the public perception. Like, you wouldn't really see or know me talking about Attack on Titan right at the end of this long video, unless you came searching for it. But there is just a lot of unnecessary toxicity and hatred within the Attack on Titan community, and it's honestly something that I don't want to either facilitate or fester or just be a part of in general. I don't necessarily care what people have to say about myself or what other websites have to say about me. I understand that people aren't going to enjoy my content, and that's perfectly fine. I just find it very odd that people personally attack me, whether it be my understanding for a story or how I perceive things, because of certain things I say in regards to certain ways I approach stories, or in this case Attack on Titan, that doesn't sit well with the person attacking me. I understand that everything I say isn't going to be agreed upon towards everyone, and I'm kind of glad that it isn't. That makes for a good conversation, that makes for a dialogue, that makes for talking about this and juggling this back and forth narrative. But there are so many people that just have it out for myself, that genuinely dislike me. It's almost like a different perspective is unnecessary for them. They don't care about it. They don't want to listen to it. And even me just sharing my own perspective or my own understanding or how I seen things was like the worst thing that one could do. It sounds super over dramatic when I put it like that. It honestly wasn't that bad. There was a lot of people hating on me for it, and I have been hated on for Attack on Titan for a very long time, to a marginal degree, but there is a small percentage of people that just don't like my content. That's fine. I think at the end of the day, that's perfectly fine. You hate who you hate, you like who you like. That's just how it goes. But I didn't want that to fester within my comment section from my perspective. So talking about it would engage with the people that genuinely didn't dislike me and give them a reason to talk about me more, which would then kind of send people to my video to start either arguments or conversations with people that are just there to share their opinion, to share their thoughts and perspectives on how they went about things. And I can't monitor the comment section or every inch or aspect of interactions on the channel and between all of you, but I can try and limit the exposure of negativity or toxicity as best as possible, is by not engaging in that said toxicity or negativity. It's also something that I just cannot be bothered to deal with. Just having a video surrounded by so much toxicity and hatred and controversial nature does not make for a good conversation for myself, nor does it make for a good position for myself. I would rather not have a video surrounding all of this negativity. It feels like a bad karma. It feels like an omen that's like weighing over my head. So to answer your question in the most backwards way possible, I honestly don't really care about the additional pages, and I also don't really care about Requiem either. The only thing I will say about Requiem is that I hope that the people making it are doing it out of good faith, because everything that I've seen from Requiem in terms of marketing or how they've approached how this story is getting the exposure that it is through the backlash of Attack on Titan. It's through hands down the worst possible way. Every time Requiem is marketed, or every time Requiem is even mentioned, it's through the disgusting hatred and negativity that comes towards Attack on Titan and to Isayama. That's something that I personally don't enjoy, and something that I will not care for whatsoever. I can only hope that it's out of respect that people want to kind of do their own version, and that's entirely up to you. But I'm not going to make a separate video on it. I'm not going to talk about it. I wish them the best with whatever they're doing and however they're approaching it, and just hope it's not in the most negative of ways. I hope their story is based more so of passion and the love for Attack on Titan, and not more so what Isayama didn't do with the character they enjoy. It's each to their own, I guess. With all of this said, welcome to the end of the video. My throat is starting to absolutely burn. I can feel it slowly catching on fire. I have not drank water. I don't even know why I sat here for an hour and 10 minutes now with no water whatsoever. My lips are dry. I can feel them husking over. I can only hope that you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it might have been a little bit more relaxing with the music in the background, which I do hope I can find a good amount of music that is kind of similar to one another to merge it all together. Once again, I do want to thank you all for the incredible and amazing support. I greatly appreciate it. Definitely leave some things that you would like for me to talk about in the next one. I would greatly appreciate it. But I hope you have a good day. Enjoy yourself. Drink plenty of water. New video every 3 days. But after this one, it's probably going to be Kaizen the following day. So we'll see about that. But thank you for watching. I appreciate you. And I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.